global commitment and a global endeavour. It benefits women and men. It is not a nice to have or a tick box exercise to be deferred or deprioritised against more serious matters of health, trade or economic prosperity. It is a prerequisite for these objectives to be achieved. It is a force multiplier. APEC economies have incredible power and levers to their hand in their economic toolkits. It can deliver for women and girls in the region. It is our responsibility to use everything available to us. We must do more at every level. This is not an impossible task, but we are making choices and trade-offs every day. We are trading off the future of women and girls to protect the status quo. We are trading off exponential economic gains to preserve outdated systems and power structures that exclude half of the population. We have become accustomed to glacial pace. We have been conditioned to accept it. Again, I ask you to consider who benefits from delay. What is stopping us from making our institutions, policies, and economies work for all of us? This work has been phenomenal. We have heard from world-class experts, the wisdom of industry, and those out on the absolute leading edge. The call to action is clear, and the recommendations are overflowing. This is no longer a matter of not knowing what to do. It is about choosing to do it. It couldn't be a more important and critical time for us to come together in this high-level policy dialogue to renew our commitments and meaningfully deliver change in our region. APEC can lead the way. We can do it for the money, prosperity and growth, and we can do it because it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Very powerful call to action. I want to start by acknowledging that the city of Seattle is situated on the ancestral lands of the descendants of the Duwamish peoples, who are enrolled members of the region's federally recognized tribes, including Muckleshoot, Suquamish, Snoqualmie, Tulalip, Puyallup, Lakhtamish, Lummi, and other Puget Sound tribes. We further acknowledge that the descendants of these original inhabitants are the stewards of this land today, as we've just heard. Like their Duwamish ancestors, members of these and other Salish sea tribes have lived on this land since time immemorial. Here, they continue to live on and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations. They work, raise their children, take care of their community, practice traditional ways, and speak traditional languages, just as their ancestors did. APEC ministers, delegates, esteemed colleagues, I'm honored to join you here today as we commence our high-level policy dialogue at the APEC Women in the Economy Forum. As you've heard, my name is Jennifer Klein, and I lead the White House Gender Policy Council, which advises President Biden on gender equity and equality issues both domestically and internationally, working in partnership with U.S. federal agencies and departments, so many of whom are here today and have been working tirelessly alongside you this whole week. It's a privilege to be speaking at this forum, particularly for me, because 12 years ago, during the United States 2011 APEC host year, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton launched this first Women in the Economy Forum. Having worked alongside her then, and now seeing all of you here today, I'm amazed at what we've been able to achieve in partnership together to unlock the full growth potential of the Asia-Pacific region by promoting the economic participation of women. Over the last decade, the United States has championed the expansion of women's economic participation across APEC through numerous multi-year initiatives, which we will continue to support. In 2017, for example, the United States helped launch the Women and Economy Subfund, Since its inception, this fund has supported 21 projects to support women's economic participation and health, and this initiative remains a resource for APEC economies working to advance women's economic participation across the region. And this year, the U.S. is once again very pleased to host the Women in Economy Forum, building on the progress we forged together. Women's economic participation and leadership are essential to achieving our APEC host year theme of creating a resilient and sustainable future for all. Our 2023 APEC policy priorities to be interconnected, innovative, and inclusive support the APEC Putrajaya Vision 2040 with a particular focus on strong, balanced, secure, sustainable, and inclusive growth. Achieving this growth in the Asia-Pacific region requires the advancement of women's economic participation, including the promotion of women-owned micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. As you've heard over the last few days, this year's APEC Women in the Economy Forum has focused on 4 objectives that we believe are critical to economic growth. First, advancing gender equality in our climate response efforts. Second, expanding digital inclusion and innovation. Third, strengthening the care economy. And fourth, promoting equity and equality in supply chains. Achieving these objectives will require collective action. In the United States, our commitment to these policy priorities is literally enshrined in our first ever national strategy on gender equity and equality, which we launched in 2021. These priorities are also reflected in the first U.S. strategy on global women's economic security, which builds on this national gender strategy. I was proud to join Secretary of State Blinken and USAID Administrator Power in launching the strategy earlier this year. Many of you have produced similar policy instruments to help strengthen families, communities, and economies by addressing critical gender gaps in economic participation that persist in the 21st century. Achieving these objectives requires collective action, and the moment demands that we accelerate our efforts. Over the past several years, we've seen time and time again that women and girls are disproportionately affected by crises, from the COVID-19 pandemic to rising food insecurity to the climate crisis. These inequalities fuel instability in local, regional, national, and global markets. We also know that the rewards that follow from women's full participation in the economy are significant. Research has shown, we've heard these numbers over the course of the last few days, that closing gender gaps in the workforce could add between $12 and $28 trillion to global GDP over a decade. Similar analyses by the IMF found that countries could boost the size of their economies by up to 35%, simply by eliminating discriminatory laws and leveling the economic playing field for women. To unleash the full economic potential of women across the APEC region, we need to work in partnership, particularly with the private sector, which has a critical role to play, and of course much to gain as well. Study after study shows that women's participation and leadership boosts operational effectiveness, corporate profits, and overall GDP growth. And a repeated refrain we've heard from all sectors during the Women in Economy Forum's 21 workshops, panels, and plenaries is that the diversity of talent and perspective that women in each of our economies bring is critical to innovation and cooperation. We invite and call upon the private sector to collaborate with us in furthering the critical imperative of women's full economic participation, including by changing business operations to promote women-led micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and global supply chains, investing in child care and other care infrastructure for employees, addressing discriminatory gender norms, and promoting gender equality as a core part of corporate business models. I'm also proud to say that the United States is taking action to promote gender equality and women's economic participation as a pillar of our foreign policy and national security efforts. That's why President Biden announced $2.6 billion for foreign assistance programs that promote gender equality worldwide. But we know we cannot do this work alone, so we look forward to partnering with APEC economies and private sector partners to advance our shared goals. To meet the challenge of the climate crisis and foster economic growth, we've announced a Women in Sustainable Economies initiative, which will promote women's participation in green and blue sectors. To help close the gender digital divide, we've launched a Women in Digital Economy initiative to address affordability and access to mobile devices and internet services, to promote digital literacy and skills training, and importantly, to address online safety, all of which are needed to advance women's economic participation in the digital economy. To lift millions of women and families out of poverty, we're working together to strengthen the global care infrastructure through the World Bank's Invest in Child Care initiative, which supports child care infrastructure in low and middle-income countries. And to close gender gaps in access to markets and skills training and fuel broader economic growth, we're promoting gender equity and equality in global supply chains through the Development Finance Corporation's 2X initiative and other efforts. In all of these initiatives, the private sector has an important role to play, and partnering with you, our fellow APEC economies, multilateral partners, and civil society will be essential to address these 21st century economic gaps for women. This week, we have developed an ambitious agenda together. Today's joint session, Women in Trade panel, and joint gala will cap off the important work we've done together here at the APEC Women and the Economy Forum. As we wrap up our efforts, I want to encourage all of us gathered here to turn our commitments into action, as you have just heard Chantal very powerfully require us to do. I don't even want to say suggest. Vice President Harris wrote a letter, I hope you've all seen it, and in it she wrote, "We believe we must be ambitious in our efforts to make continued progress on gender equity and equality, and there is much left to do. I assure you from the highest levels of the U.S. government, we mean to do that." Collectively, we've built a toolbox of resources, sharing best practices and lessons learned over many years. Let's honor the shared agenda we developed this week by working together to implement in the months and years to come for the benefit of gender equality and women's economic advancement, and also to foster economic prosperity and stability across the entire APEC region. Thank you very much.
Everyone has a chance to spend a moment enjoying this beautiful city. We would like to raise the Women in Economy Forum Chair's statement, which will serve as a guide for ministers to the PPWE on our objectives for the year. We're gathered here today to promote the economic participation of women across the APEC region for the benefit of all its members. Through the APEC Putrajaya Vision 2040 and Outari Plan of Action, APEC leaders committed to pursuing and ensuring quality growth that brings economic potential, benefits, greater health and well-being to all, including women. In 2011, the United States launched the Women in the Economy Forum for the first time, where we adopted the San Francisco Declaration, which affirmed each member economy's commitment to improving women's access to capital and markets, building women's skills and capacity, and supporting women's leadership in both the public and private sectors. At this year's Women in the Economy Forum, we've had the chance to recommit to priorities set forth in the San Francisco Declaration, and to ensure that our efforts meet the unique challenges of this moment, with a focus on 4 21st century challenges that are critical to our shared agenda of advancing women's economic security and broader economic growth. First, advancing gender equality in our climate response efforts. Second, expanding digital inclusion and innovation. Third, strengthening the care economy. And fourth, promoting equity and equality in supply chains. Our work takes place during an unprecedented time of conflict and crisis, with significant effects on women and girls around the world. In the spirit of cooperation, I will call on all of us to work together in good faith to meet these challenges and create an environment that fosters the full participation of women and girls. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. I will now turn to Matt Murray, the United States Senior Official for APEC, to discuss this year's priorities on women and inclusive growth. Senior Official Murray, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And on behalf of our entire U.S. APEC team, welcome to Seattle. Very excited to be here for the opening of the APEC High-Level Policy Dialogue on Women in the Economy as the 7th ministerial meeting of our host year. The United States is thrilled to be hosting APEC in 2023, and especially to be back here in Seattle, where we hosted the inaugural APEC Leaders Meeting in 1993. And we're very honored to be able to bring the APEC Women in Economy Forum back to the United States, 12 years after it was launched during the last U.S. host year, in order to underscore APEC's commitment to women's economic empowerment. We are pleased that the WEF has been fully incorporated into APEC and that economies have benefited from WEFs held every year since. Speaking personally, one of the highlights of my diplomatic career was attending the very first Women in Economy Forum in San Francisco in September 2011. And I consider the continuation of this focus on women's economic empowerment to be one of the most important responsibilities in my role as U.S. Senior Official for APEC. If you could bring the PowerPoint back up and go to the next slide, please. So thank you for providing us with this opportunity to discuss the U.S. host year priorities for APEC in 2023. As you know, our U.S. APEC 2023 theme is creating a resilient and sustainable future for all. Our 2023 theme aligns with Putrajaya Vision's 3 drivers of economic growth: trade and investment, innovation and digitalization, and strong, balanced, secure, sustainable, and inclusive growth, and will help us move towards implementation of the Aotearoa Plan of Action and the Bangkok Goals on the Biocircular Green Economy model. Our 2023 host year focuses on 3 overarching policy priorities: interconnected, innovative, and inclusive. As we dive into our policy priorities and areas of focus for 2023, you will see that the cross-cutting concepts of building resilience, strengthening environmental sustainability, and advancing inclusive policies are woven across our priorities and our work. Next slide, please. Our first policy priority is interconnected, building a resilient and interconnected region that advances broad-based economic prosperity. We believe that creating new connections and strengthening existing ties across the APEC region is at the heart of sustained economic recovery and will be critical to future growth and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region. As the host of APEC 2023, the United States is building upon Thailand's important work in this area last year. This year's WEF will advance our interconnected theme through its focus on promoting equity and equality in supply chains. Next slide, please. Our second priority is innovative, enabling an innovative environment for a sustainable future. The digital economy is an important theme here in Psalm 3 in Seattle, and we're pleased to see this year's WEF also focused on expanding digital inclusion and innovation for women. Promoting women in STEM fields also remains a key area of APEC's work as we seek to expand opportunities for women in the digital economy. Next slide, please. And our third policy priority is inclusive, affirming an equitable and inclusive future for all. We recognize that to achieve sustained economic growth, we must ensure that all segments of our societies are able to fully participate in and benefit from an increasingly connected and globalized economy. The WEF seeks to implement the goals of the La Serena Roadmap for Women and Inclusive Growth and the Putrajaya Vision 2040, and its focus on implementing gender equality programs and reforms across APEC economies. The 2023 Women in Economy Forum will address important inclusion topics and discussions on advancing gender equality in our climate response efforts and strengthening the care economy. And by enabling greater potential for prosperity among underserved and marginalized people, APEC can facilitate equitable and accelerated economic growth across our region. Next slide, please. So here, you'll see the 3 implementation agendas for our 2023 host year, which address various challenges in a cross-cutting manner. Each agenda paper has the following common traits. They're not designed to be consensus documents. They're all based on prior APEC work streams and work towards the implementation of these work streams. They seek to leverage ministerial meeting outcomes and were designed to cut across all the ministerials, and they emphasize the importance of stakeholder engagement, especially with the private sector. So prior to Psalm 1, we introduced the Manoa Agenda for Sustainable and Inclusive Economies. The Manoa Agenda, inspired by the Manoa community in Honolulu, Hawaii, will continue the legacy of the U.S. APEC host year in 2011, which launched work both to promote green growth and expand economic opportunities for women in the region. Through the Manoa Agenda, the United States commits to working with other APEC economies in 2023 to build on APEC's existing commitments and work streams as identified in the Bangkok goals, as well as to consider new aspirational opportunities to further APEC's sustainability objectives. During Song 2, we introduced the Digital Pacific Agenda, which will use APEC to support the responsible design, development, and deployment of emerging digital technologies aimed to secure digital access for consumers and businesses, work with the private sector to bring underserved individuals and small businesses into the digital economy, and help shape the rules, norms, and standards that govern the digital economy. The Digital Pacific Agenda provides practical steps to implement established APEC policy goals during the U.S. APEC host year, including in support of the APEC Internet and Digital Economy Roadmap, the Putrajaya Vision 2040, the Ultra Rural Planned Action, and the La Serena Roadmap on Women and Inclusive Growth. And as a centerpiece of the Digital Pacific Agenda, we're excited to host the first ever APEC Digital Month here in Seattle. Digital Month is a program of digital-themed workshops, roundtables, and public-private policy dialogues, stakeholder-led or co-led events and field trips, and digital-related sessions at APEC ministerial meetings. And we're delighted that the Women in Economy Forum has also been engaged in many of these programs. And then most recently, we introduced the Bay Area Agenda on Resilient and Inclusive Growth. The United States calls on APEC economies to work together to ensure that the progress we have made in recent years can endure through the unpredictable challenges of the future. This agenda aims to ensure that the work of APEC 2023 strengthens economic ties throughout the region and increases supply chain resilience while continuing to integrate the cross-cutting concept of inclusion. In particular, the agenda seeks to advance our efforts across a number of areas, including women in the economy, by connecting women entrepreneurs, minority-owned businesses, and women-owned small and medium-sized enterprises with corporate and government procurement and global value chains, which allows businesses to scale, which incubates entrepreneurs, and reduces social barriers for women and minority-owned businesses. Next slide, please. So as we wrap up this presentation, just wanted to underscore we're very excited to host you all here in Seattle, again, which is just the most recent installment in our host year, and we've been really honored to be able to host 6 ministerial meetings. This is the 5th of 6 here during the month, and we look forward to welcoming you all to San Francisco for APEC Economic Leaders Week from November 11th to 17th. And we will be sending out more details on APEC Economic Leaders Week to economies shortly after our meetings in Seattle conclude. So thank you again, Chair, for providing us this opportunity to give a brief overview of the host year priorities. We welcome any feedback or suggestions today from member economies or any time throughout the year on how we can further improve upon our planning. And we hope you all have an enjoyable stay in Seattle, and our U.S. team looks forward to continuing to work with each of you and your delegations. Thank you, Chair.
Chair of the 2023 High-Level Policy Dialogue on Women and the Economy for successfully hosting the APEC Women and the Economy Forum 2023 and convening this session today. And it's always an honor for me to attend this meeting because this body can drive change. In 1996, leaders committed to put special emphasis on the full participation of women and youth. Yet, it wasn't until 2011 in San Francisco, when the U.S. last hosted APEC, as we heard previous speakers say this, that we took concrete steps towards gender mainstreaming by formalizing a platform for doing so. We established a policy partnership for women and the economy and held the first Women and Economy Forum. In 2019, in Chile, we agreed on the La Serena Roadmap for Women and Inclusive Growth, which serves to ensure that the decades of rhetoric on women's economic empowerment, which serves to ensure is translated into an actionable plan that we can track. These developments tell us while there is will and commitment to advance women's economic empowerment, it has taken us decades to get here. We're not here, and we're not there yet. Our work shows us that there remains stubborn policy and data gaps, as well as social cultural norms that serve to take us back decades. The PPWE, under the leadership of Chantel Stratford, must be commended for ensuring that members discuss candidly the tasks at hand as we work to advance women's economic empowerment in APEC through the La Serena Roadmap Implementation Plan. It is said that what gets measured gets done. Even as we make strides in measuring the progress of women's economic empowerment through the APEC Women and Economy Dashboard, I must underline that we could do better if we had more robust sex disaggregated data, which is key to better informed and well-targeted, tailored policy interventions. One example is in the area of unpaid care work. It is reported that women spend an average of 4 hours and 20 minutes a day doing unpaid care work, almost 3 times that spent by men. But we need data to be able to quantify this impact, not just on productivity, but also to push for factoring unpaid care work in our measurement of economic growth. Let me highlight some salient findings from the dashboard, which was undertaken by the Policy Support Unit, the APEC Policy Support Unit. The 2023 dashboard shows progress in some areas. Unfortunately, the dashboard also shows us not just that we have more to do, but that in many areas we have been standing still. Take access to credit. The good news is that more women in the region have formal, financial, and mobile money accounts, and we do see increased uptake in digital financial services and online platforms. However, 12 APEC economies do not have laws mandating non-discrimination in credit access based on sex. On workforce participation, we saw a significant decline in women's participation at the start of the pandemic to 56.4% in 2020 from the 2019 level of 58.3%. There has been some recovery recently, but it is still below the pre-pandemic times. The dashboard also reveals that 18 APEC economies prohibit discrimination based on sex in hiring. But this is no change from 10 years ago. Women who are of childbearing age or are pregnant are at greater risk of experiencing employment-related discrimination. On the positive side, 17 member economies have laws penalizing or preventing the dismissal of pregnant women. This too, unfortunately, has remained the same for a decade now. The gender wage gap also persists. Policies need to change since only 11 out of 21 APEC member economies have laws on equal remuneration for women and men for work of equal value. Navigating and participating in this digital era requires upgraded digital skills. However, within APEC, women represent a minority in STEM, R&D, and research and innovation. It's important to note that women's participation in these fields has remained below 35% for 2 decades now. The underrepresentation of women in leadership roles has remained a glaring issue in both the public and private sectors. APEC still has a long way to go to achieve gender equality in political decision-making. In 2022, only 27% of ministerial level and leadership positions in parliaments were held by women. This is the highest level achieved in 20 years. This is a sad story. According to the World Economic Forum 2023 Global Gender Gap Report, which covers 102 economies continuously, at the current rate of progress, it will take us 162 years to close the political empowerment gender gap. So, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have our work cut out for us. We must match rhetoric with action, hence the significance of this meeting. The APEC Secretariat stands ready to provide support to the important work that you are doing. Thank you, and thank you, Jen.
That we still have so far to go. Women continue to play a vital role as drivers of economic recovery and in building resilience in our economies following the destructive pandemic years. APEC members know that collective and coordinated effort through public-private collaboration is key to expanding economic opportunities for women, and we urge greater progress towards the La Serena Roadmap goals. Achieving gender parity in leadership across the public and private sectors is critical in addressing gender gaps. This year, APEC has pursued an agenda around the theme of equity, opportunity and sustainability, all of which are of relevance and importance to the economic empowerment of women. This morning I'll report on 4 of the APEC key messages today. The first is around formalisation and access to support. We note that the importance of formalising businesses into the economy is often overlooked, and yet women-led businesses are increasingly a large section of the informal sector. This makes it almost impossible for them to receive the critical support needed to improve the viability of their businesses and to allow them to fully contribute to their communities. These circumstances were all too evident as women-led businesses struggled to survive the challenges presented by the pandemic. Women entrepreneurs make up a significant proportion of MSMEs. They need persistent, intentional and tailored support to access finance, business networks and capacity building programs. The second key message is around digital transformation. The pandemic triggered an acceleration in digital transformation. This has presented significant opportunities as well as tremendous challenges for women. The adoption of digital technologies was in order to facilitate remote work arrangements, access to healthcare and government services, participation in global supply chains, education, and almost every aspect of life. As a result, the digital divide has widened, where those who are unable to access the opportunities afforded by technology are significantly disadvantaged. Women are too often in that group. Economies must strive to ensure that women have equal access to digital resources, connectivity, and digital literacy and skills training to support them in the workplace and in their businesses. This includes training on cyber risks and security, and APEC has developed a cybersecurity assessment toolkit for MSMEs which can assist. APEC also notes the significant opportunities afforded to women through the application of AI in digital health. The third key message is around women in STEM education and careers. As technology drives every aspect of the economy, ensuring women are strongly represented in STEM roles is critical to their economic empowerment and fundamental for businesses to thrive. This year, APEC undertook a research project to identify gaps in and existing barriers to women's participation in STEM education and employment. APEC engaged Erin Weiser to undertake this work. We worked across private sector networks and partnered with LinkedIn to access data which had not previously been available, and which provides a broader picture of obstacles to women's engagement in technology-based industries. STEM employers have a strong incentive to expand their talent pool, given global shortages of workers with STEM skills. In the US alone, it has been estimated that 3.5 million STEM jobs will need to be filled by 2025. The growing importance of investing within ESG parameters has pushed firms to seek gender equity for financial and social reasons in equal measure. And recent research by Credit Suisse also found that companies with greater gender representation perform better in terms of operating margins, credit rating, and share price. In relation to STEM education and careers and employment, we ask the question, why is there still such disparity, and what can be done to effectively overcome the barriers? We have found so far that while progress has been made since the 2017 APEC Women in STEM framework, but it is still going to take time to build up the women in STEM pipeline. We need to make early intervention in girls' education, address cultural and societal factors, and emphasise improved interest in engineering and computer sciences. We need to build supportive environments that value and encourage women's contributions and ensure that education is affordable for all women. We must also invest in mentorship. Workplaces need to support employees to manage family responsibilities, address biases in hiring practices, workplace culture, and wage and seniority gaps. We need to consider why women with STEM degrees do not join the STEM workforce at the same rate as men, why they earn less when they do, and why they drop out at higher rates, and why they are underrepresented in leadership roles. More support must be offered to women entrepreneurs in research and development. We need to ask why women studying STEM subjects appear to be subjected to harassment in greater levels than women in non-STEM studies, and why women researchers are subjected to high levels of violence. The APEC study makes a number of recommendations to APEC ministers and will also make recommendations to the APEC economic leaders in our report to them in a couple of months, with actions to support and encourage women in education, in employment and as entrepreneurs. It goes without saying that it is in all our interests to ensure that women are able to actively contribute to and participate in every aspect of our economies, most particularly in STEM fields, given the critical role of technology in every aspect of our societies today. The final report will be available in the coming months. And then lastly, creating an MSME ESG inclusion framework. We recognise that women entrepreneurs are strong agents in working to achieve inclusive and sustainable growth in our region. MSMEs make up 97% of the region's businesses, with many being led by women, and many of those being integral to global supply chains. We know that women employees and women leaders in business prioritise sustainability, and that their influence and impact in achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals can be significant. Incorporating ESG principles and practices into business is increasingly a requirement of doing business, and yet has been out of reach for many MSMEs and women-led enterprises. In recognition of this, APEC is developing an ESG inclusion framework aimed at assisting MSMEs. APEC recommends that women-led MSMEs are supported to participate in that framework. Thank you for the opportunity to present APEC's comments and recommendations to you. We look forward to continuing to work with APEC economies and to further women's economic participation in the region.
For APEC 2023. This year, we in PPWE have discussed micro, small and medium enterprises, gender and trade, e-commerce, the care economy, gender and climate, and structural reform. I'm glad to see these themes are being advanced through our projects, workshops, and dialogues. I'd like to offer 3 highlights from our work program this year. Firstly, the care economy. PPWE recognises that care is critical social infrastructure and the backbone of our economy. Supported by cross-border engagement, workshops and expert panellists, the PPWE is identifying solutions to better value and measure unpaid care work, invest in paid care in the paid care economy, and redistribute care work between women and men. This is critical for economic participation and empowerment. PPWE has also discussed the importance of parental leave policies, improved access to affordable and quality childcare, and support for private sector care provisions. In coming months, the PPWE will work together to develop a non-binding APEC Care Compact to establish voluntary principles to rebalance the gendered undertaking of unpaid and domestic care work and to better value the paid care economy. Discussions on gender segregation in the labour market and its impact on gender equality continue. The PPWE continues to advance structural reform efforts by advocating for more analysis and consideration of the different economic impacts of policies on women and men. We heard that gender equality budgeting improves the evidence for resource allocation, provides greater transparency of the impact of the budget on different groups of people, and creates better and fairer outcomes. These tools can be used to identify and fund policy measures that close these gender gaps and avoid measures that exacerbate gender inequalities. The PPWE also highlighted the need to do more to collect and better understand gender disaggregated data in our region to ensure policies do not negatively impact women and girls or continue to entrench bias and advantage in favour of male counterparts. Finally, the PPWE have been encouraging cross-border collaboration, which is key to mainstreaming gender across APEC and learning from the lived experiences of a diverse group of people. We held important discussions on the intersection between gender and trade in a joint dialogue with the Committee on Trade and Investment and structural reform with the Economic Committee. The PPWE discussed future opportunities to collaborate with the APEC Committee on Trade and Investment, Economic Committee and the SME Working Group. As PPWE Chair, I delivered a progress update on the La Serena roadmap to senior officials on the 15th of August. APEC has made positive progress to implement the La Serena roadmap, but it is limited and incremental. We must continue to lift ambition and accelerate efforts to improve gender analysis and monitoring and evaluation measures across a variety of activities to ensure we deliver tangible outcomes for women and girls. Strong gains have been made in increasing the number of initiatives to advance women's economic empowerment across all of the roadmap's key action areas since 2021. Women's access to capital and markets continues to be our most prioritised. But more work is needed within APEC to design and implement initiatives to strengthen women's labour force participation, improve access of women to leadership positions in all levels of decision making, support women's education, training and skills development and access and a changing world of work, and advance women's economic empowerment through data collection and analysis. When we look at the detailed analysis of progress, there are 5 areas which have seen no improvement since the last report. These include promoting women into formal work, closing the gender pay gap, improving access to decent employment, preventing gender-based violence, and countering gender stereotypes in education and skills development. These areas are fundamental to achieving gender equality and ensuring women fully participate in and benefit from the economy. These gaps demonstrate that APEC is not yet doing enough to get to the root of gender inequality, the gender norms and attitudes embedded in our institutions that continue to harm women and girls and favour men. This is evident in the minimal improvement in closing the gender gap. Prioritising the design and funding of initiatives that address these gaps will be key to achieving the roadmap's objectives. There is a lack of knowledge and use of the gender inclusion guidelines across APEC. Only 26% of initiatives report using the guidelines in project design or delivery. The Women in the Economy dashboard is better understood within APEC, but is also underutilised. I am pleased to report that the PPWE project implementation is tracking well. Outside of projects, however, there is limited effort to mainstream gender and women's economic empowerment, such as through plenary meetings and governance documents. I would like to see all working groups include a standing agenda item on gender and inclusion at our meetings, and ensure that strategic plans include commitments to advance the La Serena roadmap with measurable targets. I can see substantial opportunities for us to further mainstream gender equality across APEC. APEC is a dynamic and representative institution, and yet less than half of the APEC committees and working groups, 17 out of 43, are led by women. This means that less than half of the discussions in this very organisation are led by women. The gender bias is starker at the higher levels of leadership. All 4 APEC committees are currently led by men. We need to do better to ensure we are elevating the voices of women across APEC and reflecting their lived experiences. Implementing gender targets for leadership roles or alternating women and men serving as chair can be an effective way that economies can ensure APEC benefits from the experience and expertise of women. In closing, I would like to remind us that men and boys don't have a monopoly on brilliance. Our economies benefit from the skills, knowledge and perspectives and experiences of women and girls. However, women and girls continue to face structural and pervasive barriers in private and public spheres. In order to address these barriers, I urge economies to adopt a mainstreamed approach to gender equality, whereby gender equality considerations are a fixture of your policy making and considered at every level of decision making. I look forward to collectively adopting the WEF statement and highlighting our shared commitment to achieving gender equality. I thank the United States for a successful host year and look forward to PPWE building on this legacy in Korea's first year next year. Thank you.